He's written on love, travel, architecture, and literature. His books have been bestsellers in over 30 countries. And over the years, he's turned his hands to, well, many different topics. Most recently, he's written a user's guide to the news, which would be interesting for people like me. Please welcome Alain de Botton. Welcome.
Hello, thank you so much. We're here to think about how work can go better. That's a very new concern. For most of human history, the whole idea of work being in any way pleasurable was just not on the agenda. You didn't work to have fun. You didn't work to be fulfilled, and there was no notion that a happy worker was a more productive worker. In HR, in the olden days, there was only one instrument that you needed. That was a whip. You just hit people a bit harder, and then they would work harder. And then a remarkable realization came only in the last 5 minutes of human development. And that's the idea that the mental state of your worker will influence the quality of their work. That's a totally new idea, never before explored. So let's be gentle on ourselves as we're trying to build a world around that fundamental insight, that the state of mind of the employee will determine the kind of work they produce. And that's why happiness is now on the agenda of companies in a way it's never been before. It's odd, the idea nowadays that we've got that work should deliver not just money, but also happiness. That idea is born in the Renaissance, when the first people suddenly are saying, hey, we want to work and be creative. And there's the notion of the creative genius. And that's where you get people like Leonardo and Michelangelo, who demonstrate that they are not merely going to be serfs, workers in a bad sense. They're going to be creative artists. And that notion of the worker as a kind of proto-creative artist has now spread everywhere. And if you ask young people, what do you want to do? What kind of a job do you want to do? They say, well, I want to be creative. And that's not necessarily that they want to paint the Sistine Chapel. What they want, though, what's echoing down the ages, is that original ambition, that good work is, in some ways, creative work. Interestingly, at just about the same time as human beings started waking up to the idea that they should work not just for money, but also for fulfillment, another remarkable idea came on the agenda. And that's the idea that you should get married, not just in order to have children, but also because you love the person you're married to. Absolutely striking. For most of human history, you just got married to somebody whose land adjoined your land, and you didn't worry about fulfillment. But we are moderns, and to be modern means two things: that we expect to be happy in love, and we expect to be happy in work. These are two beautiful ideals, but they let us down constantly. Often on a Sunday evening, we have a crisis around one or the other, or both. It's absolutely normal. That's what it means to belong to the modern world. Part of the problem is that we are believers in instinct. You know how people will say to you things like, oh, it's not good to think too much, just follow your gut. This is the most I speak as a philosopher. This is the most disastrous piece of advice you could ever follow. Our gut instinct is almost always wrong. Now, where is our gut instinct recommended most? In two areas, surprise, surprise: love and work. So we are incredibly rational creatures, able to deduce from experience and to break down problems into smaller parts and think logically. But when it comes, let's take love first. I'll drop love in a second. But when it takes love, people go, oh, how am I going to find love? Well, I just know that this person's right for me. I just got that right feeling. And then 50% of the population divorce within 5 years. In other words, we are disastrous at working out what our instincts are. And then there comes the issue of work. How are we going to find a good job? Well, in the same way as we're supposed to find a good lover, by chance. In the olden days, in relationships, in religious eras, there was the notion of a calling. There was the idea, the word calling comes from religions, and the idea is that you're going about your daily business, and suddenly you will hear a voice, and it's the voice of God. And God will call you to do something in his ministry on earth. Perhaps you must go to the Holy Land, or fight a crusade, or go and dig up some bones of an ancient saint, something like this. And you will hear that voice, and that's what it means to have a calling. Now, when the world became secular, when Britain became secular, we imported that notion of a calling into the modern workplace. So people go, oh, I've got a calling to be a doctor. Oh, great. And so I've heard a voice. I must go and heal the sick. Now, the problem with the notion of calling, it's very charming, but only about 0.001 of us percent of us ever hear a voice. We don't hear that voice going, be an accountant, you must go into HR, right? We don't hear that. We stumble into things. We sit around when we're 16 or 17 wondering what on earth we're going to do with our lives, and the process is catastrophic. And the reason why we don't apply our brilliant logical brains to this is that we are romantics who believe that we should find employment according to instinct. This is disastrous, as I'm trying to stress. We have entirely the wrong education system. We are bringing up people according to a world that does not exist. What we call education nowadays is basically a hangover of a religious scheme of education. We were brought up originally by monks and nuns. They were the ones who controlled education in Western Europe for hundreds of years. And we still have built into the education system a complete unworldliness. Why do we study this subject called maths, when actually no one does maths, apart from 1% of the population, in the way that maths is done? But 99% of us do it in a key way which is never taught to us, which is business. We don't get taught business. There is no such subject as business, at least until very, very far, until it's too late in the education system. We also study weird subjects like English literature. What on earth is this subject called English literature? What it should really be called is relationships, because that's really what literature is concerned about, relationships. Why don't we study relationships, given that an enormous amount of damage is done to the economy and to human lives by the fact we don't know how to run relationships? We don't do it because the education system is clinically opposed to utility. If you go to any academic or teacher and you say, we'd like what you do to be a bit more useful, and they go, oh, no, we don't like things being useful. We believe in training people for the whole of life. And you go, but life comprises relationships, employment. Yes, but we don't mean that sort of thing. We don't want to narrow things down to just making money. And you go, but saving people from divorce is not making money. The conversation goes nowhere. These people are institutionally opposed to being useful. This is a disaster. We need the major corporations of this country to gather together and reinvent the education system, because government doesn't know how to do it and schools don't know how to do it. Come to me later for advice on this. But we need a whole-scale reform of the system called education. There's also a field, a tragic field, called career counseling. Now, if you look at the FTSE 100, big corporations devoted to pizzas, running shoes, footballs, etc., much more important than this is the job of finding someone a job that they love and are well suited to. Is that in the FTSE 100? No. There are no major corporations geared to the immense task of matching people with a job that they can enjoy and flourish in. There is an enormous business area here, and yet it's disorganized. Career counseling is done from people's basements and spare bedrooms. It hasn't advanced in 50 years. We are still operating with the utterly flawed Myers-Briggs test, and though we have creativity every minute in many areas of technology, there is a fundamentally stalled nature of career counseling. We need to get better. It's stuck at the level of medieval brain surgery. In medieval brain surgery, they had a few good ideas. If you had a certain pain, they might drill a hole in your skull. Sometimes that would relieve the symptoms. Other times it would kill you. We are stuck at that sort of level in career counseling, and we're paying the price. Most young people going into the workplace think that there is really only one kind of employment, and that is being a footballer. The reason is not that the young people are idiots, but because they follow this thing we call the media. And in the media, people never do any work. Well, they do two kinds of jobs. Either they're actors or they're sports people. Nothing else goes on. The spotlight of glamour only ever falls on those two jobs. This is catastrophic. We need the light of glamour to fall on the jobs of, well, the poor engineers are always mentioned at this point. But yes, engineering, as we know, is not very glamorous. Engineers, their holidays do not feature in the right-hand side of the Daily Mail. Their wives are not featured going to get a drink from the bar, etc. We need the light of glamour to properly illuminate the life we actually live in. Isn't it striking? When I think of literature, if you were a Martian and you went into a bookshop and thought, what is this species? What do they do with their days? And you read the average novels on the front table at Waterstones, you would come away with the idea that human beings basically only do two things: murder people and fall in love. Well, actually, the number one thing we do is work. But that work is not reflected in the literature we read, and therefore you have generations coming up that are entirely ignorant of the world of work. It's not their fault. The way in which work, the mirror that we hold up to the world of work, is entirely deficient. So we've got a problem with instinct, we've got a problem with education, and we've got a problem with the mirroring and the representation of work. Now, what do people really want from their work? what's their deepest passion around work? Well, if you interview people, as I've done, you'll very often hit the word meaning. What people really want from their work is meaning. Now, what is this word meaning? You know, people will leave a job and they go, it wasn't meaningful enough. What is a meaningful job? I think a job becomes meaningful whenever people feel either that through their work they're helping someone to suffer less, or that through their work they're helping someone to enjoy life more. In other words, the reduction of suffering and the increase of pleasure is at the heart of what we call meaningful work. And that's why being a doctor is very meaningful, and being a nurse, and being an opera star, etc. Now, the problem with meaning, we have a crisis in meaning. Let me say that all jobs, if you are running a profitable business, your business is meaningful, right? And yet, many jobs don't feel meaningful. Now, why is that? Why can an enterprise be doing something that's meaningful? Oh, we're making chocolate biscuits. That's very meaningful. But the person within that enterprise might not feel that it is particularly meaningful. What's going on? Well, I think we have two problems. One is time, and the other is scale. The number one generalization you can make about the world of work nowadays is that it takes place within gigantic systems. We are a world of specialization. Adam Smith, the great economist, first deduced the connection between productivity and specialization. The more specialized your workforce, the more productive and fruitful your economy will be. We know that we live in the UK in a very advanced, very wealthy economy, because when you go to a party and you say to people, what do you do? Almost never can you understand what the job is. Because they'll go, I'm the regional deputy packaging manager for the systems analyst. And you go, what? What is that? And that's a very good sign. That means we're a rich society. A rich society, you should not be able to understand with only one question what people do. That's a good sign. The problem is meaning, because if you are a tiny, tiny, tiny piece of this giant machine, you are losing sight of the meaning of your organization. And this leads to a terrific loss of energy and purpose in an organization. If you say to people, what are your job fantasies? I once ran a little questionnaire with a sample group asking people what were their fantasy jobs. And there were two jobs that came tops. There was multiple choice. And the two jobs that came top were A, running a cake shop, and B, running a B&B. Now, it's ridiculous. It's a nightmare running a cake shop, and a B&B, obviously, disastrous. However, these are people's fantasies, and people's fantasies tell us a lot about people's motivations. What is it about running a cake shop that's nice? Well, a lot of it is that A, it's small, and B, it's quick. You gather in the morning, you put your cake, you make your mixture, put it in the oven. By lunchtime, it's ready, you take it out, your customers are coming in, they're handing over the money, you see them eating it, they're pleased, and by the end of the day, you have gone through an arc of from initial ingredients to the delivery of the product and the satisfaction of the customer in 24 hours. Why do people like football? People like football because within 90 minutes, there's so much drama. Now, there's lots of drama in life generally, of course. What it is about football is that it's structured drama that takes place within a short time. Why do people like going to the theatre? Because, again, a story which in real life would take years and years has been compressed. We like compressed stories. We lose the thread of larger stories. Imagine a football game that took about 7 years and had 15,000 players in it, with rules which were generally rather obscure. Would anyone watch that? No. Most of us are in jobs that are a little bit like that. Most of us are in organizations of 15,000 or so employees on 4 continents making a project which will be ready in 2018. That's really frightening for the level of meaning. We've simply forgotten what the whole thing's for. There are people who know what the whole thing's for, and they sit at the top of an organization. But your foot soldiers have forgotten what it's about. In other words, a key responsibility of employers is to tell a story back to their employees, to reflect back to them the wider purpose of what they're doing, which is constantly leaching from their brains. Think about a football match, think about a tragedy, think about a work of art. You need to make the job feel as coherent as a game of football. You need to give a sense of progression that is akin to a soap opera. Otherwise, there will be a leaching of energy. There's a lot of complaints. You hear a lot of complaints nowadays about young people and how difficult they are. and how spoilt they are. They don't understand the rules of work. They've been mollycoddled. They've been brought up by mothers who said, would you like fish fingers today or pasta? And they change their mind halfway through, throw the thing, and the mother goes to cook again, and the father has an argument with the mother saying, you're too soft, the kid's not being prepared for life, and the mother says, no, I just want to be sweet to the kid, and the parents have an argument, and the kid grows up spoilt. That's our nightmare, that our kids are growing up too spoiled. They've been given too much choice, and they go into the workplace, and you say, go and do that. And they go, well, that's your view, but I don't really agree with that, right? So this is potentially a real problem. Now, rather than making it into a problem in the classic way, we have to find what the upsides are. The parents who are bringing up their kids the way that parents do nowadays are not crazy. They simply are placing great emphasis on one area rather than another, and employers have to understand what that area is, because there is an enormous upside if you understand the psychology of this new generation that could choose between fish fingers and pasta when they were 4. They're very different. These people are lousy at obeying. They don't do obedience very well at all. However, they are very good, extremely good at authenticity. That's what they were brought up to do. What is authenticity? It's the harnessing of intrinsic passion to a goal. And if you get somebody who's working authentically, you're going to have real problems around obedience, because they'll say, oh, I'm not sure I want to do that. But if you get them on the right track, they will work about 7 times harder than anybody who's merely working out of obedience. So there's an opportunity and there's a cost. You have to make the job authentic, and you have to be careful around demands for obedience, because these people will give you a lot, but you need to handle them in the right way. So rather than simply going, these people aren't fitted for the world of work, and we just have to give them a good dose of reality. They're coming in, they're a bit spoilt, we need to wake them up to the real world. Well, the real world is many things. And in the most productive sectors of the economy, the real world is now being run with authenticity, not obedience. And we have to make the appropriate shift. Look, I'm a great believer in the future of capitalism. You sometimes hear it said that we've got too much of everything, and that the economy is stuffed full of goods and services, and we can only expect moderate growth for the next 1,000,000 years because we've basically got everything. Technology has satisfied all our needs. We've got too many cars, we've got too many fridges, there's overcapacity, and that's why we got flat growth. So there's a kind of, in the back of many of our minds, is a depressing story about capitalism. We've got a bit too much of everything. I don't believe in this at all. Think about your day. Think of an average day, and imagine any moments in your day when you've been unhappy about anything at all. If you can write down anything at all on your list of anything that's gone wrong, you have a business. Every business starts with the unhappiness of its customers. If you find an area of unhappiness, that's a business waiting to be born. Now, let's think about the average day of an average person. So they get up, breakfast cereal. How's that going around breakfast cereal? Pretty good. I'm pretty happy. I've got a choice of, I think, 98 breakfast cereals. That's really good. So I'm not really unhappy at all. Milk, fantastic supply of milk, doing really well. But actually, my partner's just, actually, that was a slightly rude comment. I'm a little bit upset. I'm feeling a bit strange inside. Tesco's, no. Sainsbury's, no. Where can I, that feeling that I've got, no, there's no provider. That's a business waiting to be born. Every feeling of unhappiness is a business waiting to be born. If you look at the FTSE 100, most of the businesses are operating at the bottom of that famous pyramid of needs by Abraham Maslow. Those businesses at the bottom are servicing basic needs: transport, shelter, basic communication, etc. Is there anyone out there operating in the higher needs? Relationships, trying to make relationships go better, trying to make our working lives go better at the level in which we're talking about. Where are these businesses? They're not there. They will be. 5 minutes ago, there were no businesses around friendship. Now, one of the largest companies on earth, Facebook, is basically a company that has monetized the area previously known as friendship, which we thought was outside of business. Well, it isn't. There are many, many new areas of life waiting to be commercialized. In other words, I was talking previously about employees, how they can be made to fit into large organizations. But it's not just that. We need new, and will get new kinds of organizations, because we haven't yet cracked the problem of human happiness. Are we all happy? No. And every time, in every area that we're not happy, there is an area for capitalism to colonize. We're only at the dawn of business. What is the ideal job? What ideally is work for? I think the dream of work is that you are able to discover within yourself qualities, adaptabilities, capacities that feel valuable to you, and that you are able to turn these into some kind of service or product that somebody else will pay you for. That is an immense challenge. We have these people at the center of our society called artists, who are the subject of quite a lot of glamour. And the reason is not that everybody can or even should be an artist, but I think because they demonstrate in a particularly clear form what I think we all would like our work to be, which is something that is very unique to us, that is drawing upon some capacities and strengths which we feel, and that we manage to externalize them and sell them to somebody else. That is still far too rare. Most of us, deep down, are not what it says on the business card. Most of us are not, in that sense, leading authentic lives. The business card says one thing, our hearts say another. This is a tremendous waste of human potential. We talk all the time about human resources, about resources going to waste. The number one resource that goes to waste, as we know, is human resources, the subject in which you are experts. But there is still an unbelievable amount of misallocated human energy and potential. It starts with our overall ideology that this should happen naturally. It doesn't. We need to focus on it. The problem is aggravated by our education system, which doesn't properly train us and hone us. It's further aggravated by the failure of career counseling and proper guidance. It's then deeply challenged by the modern workplace, which has grown so large and can't tell its own story back to its workers. We have hurdle after hurdle. But by getting clearer about what they are, I'm a real optimist. I think it may take another 100 years, but I think from the position of 100 years, when we look back at the waste of talent that's going on now, we will be astonished. We simply won't allow it anymore. I'm hopeful. You guys are spearheading the revolution. Thank you very much.
Don't rush off. Don't rush off. One quick question. Do you think that it's possible for everyone to be able to find meaning in their own careers?
Almost everyone. Almost everyone. Because everybody has capacities and skills. That's not to say that everybody can be a great painter, a great, whatever. And I think some of the problems of modern society is over-ambition about what can be achieved. If you go into any bookshop and you look at the self-help shelves, there are basically two kinds of books on those shelves. The first kind are telling you, you can do it, you can have anything, you could be anyone, do it. And then the other kind are telling you how to cope with what the Americans politely call low self-esteem. And there's a real relationship between a society that says anyone can do anything and a terrible, terrible low self-esteem problem. Advanced economies have a higher suicide rate than more undeveloped economies. What is that telling us? Advanced economies are almost all very secular economies. They don't believe that the gods or God is determining our life. We live in a world nowadays where we hold people responsible for what happens in their careers. If I said to you, I've just been sacked, but it's not me, it's the gods turned against me, you think, rubbish. Or if you said, I'm unlucky, people go, no, you're not unlucky, you've done something wrong. So in other words, we hold people responsible for what happens to them. And this is both liberating and deeply oppressive. Inside, the average worker is an unbelievable angst around the weight of responsibility that they bear for steering the course of their life. The reason why we are so tense about what we achieve is that we feel we're totally in control of what we achieve. And that's a new and modern pressure. It can be an almost unbearable pressure. So, to answer your question, do I believe that anyone can have a glorious destiny? Perhaps not glorious. Do I believe that everyone can find satisfaction? Absolutely. But it's like threading a needle. You have to understand what the world can provide and what the individual is best suited to. Nowadays, we rush through that decision. We trust people's instinct. We have to get a lot more logical. We are wasting people's lives.
Okay, we're going to leave it there. Alan, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Pleasure. Great.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks.